And the next morning, I was supposed to, as part of my job, judge a children's acting competition at the state fair. And we had a board member who was friends with the DA. So I called my boss that had gotten a DUI. He called the board member. They got me released early the next morning, and I took a cab straight from prison to the children's competition. Now, obviously, you would choose different clothes for judging children at a state fair than you would for going on a bender.
And we are here with Sean. Hi, Sean.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. It's always I feel like in some weird ways it's a big ask, but it's really fun once you do it. But not everybody is public about being sober.
I think I got a little forced into this because my bottom was so kind of public and in my field, in the arts field, like everybody knew. I got fired from a very high profile job because I couldn't stay sober during the day. And so I feel like I had to tell people I was sober. So I really had to tell people I was sober, and I had to overdress and arrive early to everything for like 4 years before anybody would trust me.
That is
And
so in let's okay. Now I'm completely
yeah,
intrigued.
well, I
You're my
don't.
favorite kind of guest. I always try to end with like, have you ever been fired? Like,
Oh
'cause-
no, we'll get right to it. We'll get right to it. So I just feel like I had to be very public about it, and once it becomes like a part of what your sobriety is, or just your persona is, people start to kind of come up and be like, "Hey, so I'm a little worried about this, or I'm that," and part of like the work that I've started doing, I had this play off Broadway that happened in 2019 that was about my sobriety. And I would get contacted about once a day from people being like, "Hey, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my ex-wife?" And at some point you were like, "I'm not a trained medical professional. Like there needs to be more things in place," but you realize everybody is so secretive and so shame-filled that anybody that's out there, when you're struggling and you're just trying to figure out like what do I do when you have like a child you're worried about and someone says, "I know this guy who knows a guy who wrote a play about sobriety," you're like, "Great, I'll find him." So I think I kind of got forced into it because I had no choice if I wanted to work, but it's maybe really been a blessing because it's really kind of forced me down this path, and suddenly now I feel like daily I have conversations with people that are trying to find help or inspiration or what do I do? And that has been really fulfilling. But sure, the average person usually probably doesn't take their worst moments and make that part of their, uh, you know, career path going forward. But I've had to do it.
once I did it, I found that I got so many emails from people, same as you, that were
Yeah.
like, do you think I have a drinking problem? It's like, well, I don't know. I don't know because I spent a lot of years convincing myself that I did not have a problem. So I guess only you can answer that, but also, I don't know. Do you relate to my story? Because I do have a drinking problem. So if you're finding that relatable enough to want to reach out, there's your answer.
I don't take a lot of quizzes to see if I'm like a crack addict because I'm not a crack addict. So I feel like if you're taking quizzes to be like, "Am I an alcoholic?" I'd be like, "Let's just skip to the end. You are." Like people don't worry about those things if it's not a part of it. But I think you and I are very similar. And this is very big in the performing arts, for a long time, being a big drinker was a part of my personality and part of what I offered and how we got casts excited and donors excited and like how we raised money and how we got jobs, and it had so many positive things to it that part of why I fought tooth and nail to not have to admit that I had to get sober was I didn't really know how I would do any of those things without this crutch that I had expertly built and used since I was 12 or 14. I mean, I was, I
Take
mean,
me
in
back
fact,
to that. Like I'm relating real hard to your story already. So take me back. You start drinking at 12.
was it 12? Was my first time having a drink, and it tasted terrible. You know, like because beer doesn't really taste good. And I think we had, oh my God, it might even have been like Milwaukee's Best, which I really is like such a silly title for a beer because there's no way that that's Milwaukee's Best. But anyway, um, the it tasted terrible, but you know, I was like a fat kid who like had trouble fitting in, and suddenly like drinking, I was like funnier. Um, there was this study that was done recently. The University of Michigan does this study called Monitoring the Future, and one of the things that they came up with was how do you predict if children are going to be addicts when they grow up?
Uh-oh.
And the question is, when you're using, do you feel more like yourself? Like, does it unlock you feeling the most version of you? And if you answer yes, you're probably on the road. And like whenever I hear that, I'm just like, oh man, I'm screwed because I really did like I was just less anxious. I was just funnier. I still couldn't talk to girls, but it wasn't like a cold sweat at all times. I could hang out. So it just like everything became a little easier. And by the time that I was working professionally, I mean, I really remember this. Like after three drinks, I could breathe. I'd get to the bar, and by the third drink, I was like, oh, okay. And obviously, if I could have stopped then, if I didn't have to go for 11 more drinks after that. But at drink three, I really felt like I could breathe. And that's just been the story my whole life is that it really just calmed everything down. It really made time go a little slower. I was a little funnier. I could ignore things. And so that, of course, I now know that I was perfectly set up to become dependent on it.
Any
And then,
addiction in your family?
oh my God, we're like, we are a family where we have a history of drinking and skin cancer. So we talk about skin cancer all the time. You go to Thanksgiving and everyone like looks at moles. Everyone has a dermatologist, but my mother is in recovery also. And part of my story is that we have the same sobriety date, 1 year apart. I called her when I was suicidal, and it was the 1 year anniversary of her getting sober, which I didn't know. And so she walked me through that night, and we still have the same sobriety date to this day. Her father died in a plane accident where it was like questionable, like narcotics were a part of it. My great grandfather, the story is that he thought he killed a man in a bar in Scotland and fled to the United States. So we're really straight up. It was right there. And what I love about our story is that when I say that we're like an Irish family with a drinking problem, everybody laughs. So on some level, we understand genetic predisposition. We understand like brain chemistry and how it gets handed down. We just don't make the leap to be like, oh, well, then if you're predisposed, it's not a moral failing. It is a brain disorder and it is chemical because we see it, but we just don't make that empathetic leap. So drinking is all in my family. We were also Mormon for a long time. And so my parents left the church when I was in high school. But because we're a family with a big drinking problem who was Mormon, it was like deep underground because you're not supposed to be drinking at all,
So
much
you
less
weren't
drinking.
Jack Mormons for a
No,
while? I know
we
a little
were,
bit about Mormons.
yeah, we were real Mormons. In fact, the, when my mom's parents died, her aunt adopted them. So I guess my grandfather or my sort of grandfather, when he died, he was a Mormon and didn't drink, except for the fact that when he died, they discovered a whole liquor cabinet inside his office that was just packed and so much booze that they gave it to the neighbors. And rumor had like a year later, like they were still working through it. So
Wow.
I mean, it was everywhere. It was sneakily a part of it. But the shame is hard for the average person to get help, but for when you are disobeying an order from God on top of it, you really don't talk about it. So, I don't, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and of course, like every addict, I'm terrified that I'm genetically pass this on to her. But I guess the thing I hope is that these conversations that I never had or didn't understand in advance can be the difference for her.
Yeah, I have a 21-year-old who, just had
Terrifying.
her first legal taste of alcohol.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Not her first taste of alcohol, but yeah, and I have a lot of open conversations about, not to scare her, but to be like, this is what I felt. I mean, I'd already been drinking for years when I was
Yeah.
her age and
Yeah.
already drank probably alcoholically. Well, I did. But so it's difficult when you watch your kids. And also, I have a biological father who was an addict, but I for a very long time didn't even relate it to myself because I didn't grow up with him. He
Sure.
was only in my life till I was like 4, and then he was back in my life later and he was a mess. But I always thought I was raised by my mother and stepfather who really didn't drink much. So very controlled, my mom. So it's interesting. I mean, I definitely think there's a genetic component. It's not necessary to become a problem drinker, you know, but it is interesting, these through lines that we see. So okay, you're drinking, you fast forward until you start performing. So did you start performing at a young age?
Yeah, I was always in the theater, and I started a theater company with some friends of mine when I was 21, and we got out of college. And we just went to the 30-year anniversary of it recently.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and it was just part of the culture, but we also bought into this idea in the arts that, like, 95% of Pulitzer Prize winning writers are alcoholics, and everybody loves, Ernest Hemingway was drinking all day long and writing, and nobody talks about the fact that he ended his life by putting a shotgun in his mouth and blowing his head off, because like that's just part of the legend of being a writer and what it means. And so it was just part of the culture, and it's kind of celebrated. Like it costs you something to be an artist. I mean, you're a writer too. It's like it's so a part of the world.
And a comedian. I started doing
Yeah.
stand-up when I was 23
Oh,
years old, and I don't know if I ever performed completely sober.
yeah. Why would you? I mean,
No, it
it's
was
like
so much easier. I also had anxiety. First time I performed, I think I'd had like 6 drinks, and I don't think there's any way I could have done it without that, and felt sober. Like I was still scared and
that's
nervous,
right,
and I was like
terrified.
6 drinks in.
Yeah, and then you're like, all right, note to self, have 6 drinks before I perform anytime,
Yes.
yeah, wherever it is. No, and the what I eventually had to go to rehab, which shows you how well it all went. But I remember in rehab they were talking about like all the great things that happened when you were drinking are true, and that really helped me because it did for a long time, and eventually it really held me back. But for a while, it really did like help me to make friends and make contacts, and for our organization to thrive, and to, you go out to meetings, and you're 23 years old with a bunch of like 50-year-old businessmen, and you buy them a round of drinks, and they think that you're amazing. And it gets you access to things, and it's a great way to for you to feel more comfortable in those moments.
You don't want to
Uh,
be the guy that's like, "Oh no, not for me. I'm sober."
that,
Like you,
oh my
that's going to
God.
be a record scratch moment in the
Right, right. Yeah. And now I've been sober long enough that like I know how to handle it, but honestly, part of, when I was coming up with every reason to not stop drinking, part of it was just like, but I want to have a career, but I want to be funny, but I want to be able to make contacts, so I guess I'll try a new sort of way to just, one of my thousand bargainings with myself. And, eventually I had to stop. And for a while it was hard. And now, of course, what's on the other end of this is that Oh my God, how embarrassing. Like to think to now I watch people that have three drinks and I'm like, ooh, buddy, I really wouldn't have had those three drinks at this business meeting. Like we're trying to get stuff done and you're flagging down the waiter for your fourth drink. And like that was me. But in my mind, it was all part of what made it work. And now I really see that yes, it helped me for a while, but I really lost a lot of opportunities that I didn't even know I had because, um, I people want to be able to contact you after 6:30 at night if they have an idea or a question. Or sometimes you have meetings at 8 in the morning now, and like that couldn't happen.
I
And
didn't
now,
even realize how flaky I was. That's one of the
of
things I
course,
realized in sobriety is I was like, I don't respond to texts. I don't respond to emails at night. And in my mind, it's like, well, I guess it's intrusive or I'm doing something else or I have kids. There are a million excuses. I never would have been like, well, no, I was drunk, so I'm not going to get back to you. But it just made me a flaky person in general. I wasn't somebody who would get back to you.
or I'd send like an upset email responding to a work thing at 1 in the morning and be like, oh my God. And the next day I have to like reread what I said and be like, oh, so, act like that's a normal thing to do to just like rage email people at 1 in the morning. And so it is really embarrassing in terms of what I didn't realize it was costing me under the guise of I needed it. And you have a kid and I have a kid now. I don't I mean, and I'm the child of an alcoholic, so I do understand how people do it, but I really don't understand how they do it because sometimes my daughter just throws up in the middle of the night, or sometimes she just like picks her nose so hard that it bleeds, and we're running around at 3 in the morning, like getting tissues, and it's all fine by 7 in the morning, but you had a small incident with your child. Everybody got 4 hours of sleep and nobody cares. You still need to go to work the next day and do everything. And I can do it now, but how would I ever have done that if I was, especially at the end, I was passing out like wearing all my clothes because I was at that point. And by the end I was a day drinker. So I really don't know
Well, take
how
me
people do
back,
it well.
slow it down. We're literally only 15 minutes in. I want to hear. So, when did it start? It's fun. It's fun with problems. It's problems. But when did it? So, it's fun. When do you start noticing the like, oh, this isn't so manageable?
I'm in my I guess I'm so my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was 28 and he was in his early 50s. And so I feel like that's a real turning point for me because it began to be then like a little self-medicating in turn. Like I had a high stress, big job. Not as high stress or as big as I made it in my mind, but it was a real one, and I only added on to make myself feel more important.
Was it in the
It
arts?
was in the arts, yeah. Is being the second in command of a theater in Louisville, Kentucky, which is, of course, the home of bourbon, and where they did all new plays every spring. And it was high profile. The New York Times would come review you, producers would come see it. And so
Wow.
big opportunities. And during that time, it's also, the arts feed into it, but also like Louisville is a very wet town. I mean, it's a party town. And so it was real easy to go out every night. And then I mean, if I look at it in retrospect, I was going out every night, but it was still, I think, all working, still doing great. And then it was every night and then some lunches. And then it was like all lunches. And then I have this real I remember these moments really clearly where I remember waking up in the middle of the night and being really hungover and feeling sick and thinking like, oh, if I have a drink, it'll fix it. And then like having a drink and then waking up in the morning and feeling better and being like, okay, well that's a little scary. I won't do it. And then like a week or two later, waking up in the night and feeling really sick and having a drink and then waking up in the morning and feeling sick again and being like, okay, well, I guess okay, I'll have a drink before I get in the shower, and that will help it. And then Next thing you know, I have kind of entered this period of my life where I'm not really drinking to enjoy myself. I'm just trying to not be sick. I'm just trying to maintain balance. I'm just trying to like not drink too much, but don't go too long without it. And, you kind of sleep for about 3 or 4 hours. You wake up, you have a little drink, you go back to bed for 3 or 4 hours. You wake up in the morning, have something in the shower. Um, and next thing you know, you're a full-blown alcoholic drinking all day long. And I guess I think I'm still functioning. I'm sure some people were onto it, but um, maybe similar to you, it's like things were going well. There were successes at work, and I think a lot of people just kind of don't want to like mess up the train while it's happening. Rehearsals are still fun, shows are still getting great reviews, things are selling well. Yeah, maybe you're drinking all the time, and I don't, I don't really understand what people knew at the time. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say, were there people like close? Did you have some close friends? Was anybody worried about you?
um, it- both, it's funny. So my play that I wrote and that has kind of gone on to be performed around the world is about my journey in recovery, and I've had friends come see it, and the the kind of two responses I get is people who are like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize it was that bad. Like I knew you during that time. I didn't realize how bad it was." And other people who come and they're just like, "Listen, you needed help like 3 years before you think you needed help in that play. Like, come on." So I think both may be true. But being an alcoholic is a lot of lying. Um, and so I just think I led this whole separate life of myself getting booze, hiding it, going places. A real fascinating thing that happened when I got sober. I really had to work on not lying. I just instinctively lied for the first like 6 or 7 months. People would ask me a question and I would just lie. And I'd be like, why am I lying about this? I don't, because I just trained myself to like keep the ball in the air, don't say anything consistent, don't really agree where you were at any given point. So at some point, I just was leading a separate life of drinking. And then I got busted at work. I was just way too drunk. And I had a boss that told me if I didn't get help, I was going to get fired.
Wait,
And
but
so
why? But in your mind, people didn't really notice. A lot of people didn't notice, but then your boss did. Were you just drunk at work? Had he
um,
been noticing? Had you been late? Like, what happened?
I had been, um, it's such a great question because it doesn't. Like obviously people knew. Like I remember one time I had well first of all I had a car accident. I blacked out while driving home one night and I drove straight headfirst into a telephone pole. And the next morning I was supposed to, as part of my job, judge a children's acting competition at the state fair. And we had a board member who was friends with the DA. So, like, I called my boss that I'd gotten a DUI. He called the board member. They got me released early the next morning, and I took a cab straight from prison to the children's competition. Now, obviously, you would choose different clothes for judging children at a state fair than you would for going on a bender. And I'd been in a significant car accident. So I had like the seat belt was appearing across my chest as the day went on because clearly it was black and blue. And like my shirt was torn and I looked terrible, but I got through it. And kind of after that, people were like paying a little bit more attention to me. And then I had one show that I was doing, and it was just wildly out of control. And so by the time that we got to opening, I got pulled aside by my boss, and he said, like, you have to quit drinking, or we're going to fire you. And I genuinely, so then after that happened, it took me a year and a half to get 90 days. So then I entered this period in my life where I was telling people that I was sober, and I was trying to be sober, but I'd be sober for like 70 days and then I would like relapse for 14 and then I would kind of pull it together. And looking back now, I think everybody knew what was going on then, but I think I was trying and I had chunks of sobriety.
I think that's such
Um,
an important part. I'm so glad you're talking about this because relapse is part of so many people's path to like getting some lasting sobriety, And people don't talk about it enough. People don't talk about like the getting, I see it a lot in meetings where if people try and they get like 30 days, but then they go out and then they get another 30 days, eventually some of those people just stop coming around because they're
yeah.
like, well, I'm failing. Whereas I just think it's a normal, I always tell people that are struggling, like, yeah, we drink because we're alcoholics, because that's what we like to do. It's like when the water what runs down the rock a certain way for years, like it's going to want to run down that same groove. Like it's very difficult to really change everything all of a sudden. So I don't know. I think your way is more understandable and probably more common than people let on. Most people don't just quit drinking and go, I'm fixed. I
Yeah.
love sobriety.
Well, it's interesting. So it by definition, it's a relapsing remitting disease. And people say like, well, I've never relapsed. And it's like, well, a relapse is also all the times that on Monday morning you said, I'm not drinking this week. And by Tuesday night you were drinking. Like, so that might be a minor one that might not have caused law enforcement to be involved, but that is technically a relapse. You said you weren't going to, and then you were. Or you said, I'm going to take
Yes.
the month off, and then 4 days in, you're back at it. And maybe you're not, causing trouble, but you technically have relapsed because you set a goal for yourself to not do something, and then you're doing it. Other things that we're not addicted to, it's really easy to set a goal and be able. So you are technically relapsing all those times. So that yes, when you go to AA and you get 30 days and then you go out, it feels significant, but it's just a larger version of what's been happening, I'm sure. Listen, I mean, I remember when I was in my 20s, right? Like a decade and a half beforehand, you would sometimes be like, it's gotten a little out of hand. I'm going to take the month off. And then you took 2 weeks off. So it's like that was just the beginning.
Yeah. So for the people that are like, well, I don't want to officially quit drinking or go get help because then if I drink again, it's a relapse. I was the same way. I did refuse to like really identify myself as having a true problem. But when I look back, I go, yes, I was relapsing all the time. I
Yeah,
say I
totally.
never had a relapse because from the time that I really tried to get sober. But if I'm being honest, yes, I had tried before. I had tried like a year and a half before I actually quit for hopefully for,
Yeah.
it's been 16 years, but I'm just saying so many I mean, same. Since my teen, I tried to quit drinking when I was like 16. When I
Yep.
was a junior in high school, I was like, I am going to quit drinking, and it lasted 3 weeks. So there you go. Been
Yeah.
relapsing since I was 16.
And I like to use the example of like if you were driving your car across the country and it broke down and you stopped and got it fixed, you wouldn't go back to the beginning of your trip and start it over again. You just
Right.
pick up where you are and go forward. So I don't think that, I love the saying that the world record for sobriety is 24 hours. So like I feel like if you relapsed, it wasn't all wasted. I mean, I learned things in those days. I wasn't good at putting them together, but I definitely like sometimes got 60 days and sometimes realized like, oh wow, I have money in my bank account and I'm doing better at work. And you start to learn things. And even though it still gets you, it's all valuable information. And so I don't, I'm a, I agree with you. I think we sometimes are really down on people who can't do it. And then we're really down on people who are relapsing a lot because it just seems like I mean, we're as bad as regular people, just being like, well, they don't want it enough, right? Which is what we bristle at when civilians think that we didn't get sober because we didn't want it enough. And so I think the more that we talk about brain chemistry, and you're right, like a water going down a rock, it's like it's really hard to go a different way down that rock when it's so easy for you.
So you're relapsing, your boss noticing?
Yeah, my boss notices, tells me you have like a year. I mean, you needed to get it together. So then I spend time pretending I'm trying to get sober, but not. And then my boss leaves and I get promoted on an interim basis and I get his job. So I was very good at like falling up. I was like barely holding it together, getting more and more responsibility. And really, I was at this point that like my whole career was really in front of me. It was about to be a huge event, and I could the amount of time in between relapses was shrinking. I could do like 60 days, then I could do like 14 days, and then it just at some point I went in, I had this big meeting to solidify me getting a job. And in the days leading up to it, I'd said like, okay, I need to quit drinking on Sunday because then I'll have been sober for like 3 days. And then it was like, okay, now I need to quit drinking on Monday because then will have plenty of time to do it. And by the time I got to it, I went into the interview drunk off my ass because I couldn't stop in any of those days beforehand. And of course, then I got fired right away. Um, and then I was suicidal because I genuinely thought like this was the beginning of October in 2011, and I just thought like, oh my God, October has so many days. Like I don't really understand how I'll live through this month. Like every day is so hard, and
Yeah.
every day is like this struggle of disappointment. And so I called and I didn't get along with my mother. And it's so funny, like we don't even have the best relationship today, but for in this one moment, I called her and she answered, and I just said like I don't know what to do. Like I'm really at the end here, and we hadn't talked that much. And it was the 1 year anniversary of her getting sober. So she's coming home from this meeting where she's gotten her 1 year chip. And so she has like the tools to get me through it. And so she gets me through that night, gets me, to agree to get on a plane the next morning. And I go to a rehab center in Jacksonville, Florida. And and then like and that night was the last drink that I had. Like rehab really worked for me. But what happened in rehab was I struggled so much because I was raised Mormon. So I was like, oh my God, whenever anybody says like the God concept, but we don't really mean God, we mean whatever you want. And like you're a writer, you're like, I don't know. I feel like words have meanings and I feel like we choose words for certain reasons. So I don't know how to say like these are the words, but they can mean whatever you want. Like that's not how writing works. And so I had like a week to go. And so I went to my counselor and I was like, listen, if I leave here in a week, like I'm screwed. Like I'm not different in any way. And he was very frustrated with me. And he was like, fine, you're just gonna have to get sober with the Jews. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And so he sent me to this men's Jewish group,
You do
where,
seem kind of Jewish.
well, thank you. Thank you.
Speaking
Yeah.
as a Jew,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
So
take you as one of mine.
yeah, so I went and it was this group of men who got together and the first thing when I walked in, they were like, "Are you ready to no longer be a scumbag?" And I was like, "Yes." And then they were like, "All right, let's," and they sat me down and they did this whole presentation to me about brain chemistry and about science and about neural pathways and they wore buffalo hats. It was very well catered. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like everything
That's
you
my
would
Jews.
that would want it to be. They would like everything that I'd been told before, like don't argue, just kind of understand what it is. Every meeting they would pick a section of the big book and they would argue about it all night long.
I
And
need this group in my
it was
life.
so refreshing to me to be like, oh my God, you can. And they were like, listen, if you don't understand something, you should like ask, you should push back, you should like that's how you investigate something is to argue over it. But part of the reason I wanted to write my play to get it out there was I had been struggling for so long to get sober. I had been court ordered by the state of Kentucky to attend AA meetings. I had been to detox. I had been to 3 weeks of rehab at that point. I'd been hospitalized at one point for alcoholism. Nobody had ever talked to me about brain chemistry, about science, about any of those things, about understanding dopamine and the way that you go through withdrawal. That at 90 days, your brain begins to reorchestrate itself to kind of maintain dopamine outputs. And before that, your brain believes you that you're probably, it doesn't believe you. It thinks you're going to drink again. So it withholds dopamine from you. So that's why you feel so terrible. And I was like, how has this been a disease since the late 50s? And you can be struggling in the middle of it and no one talks about the science of it. Like how there is no other disease that we have where, and it's so funny, like now that I've been in this world for a while, this actually used to be like for a long time, we thought that people that got cancer, it was like kind of their fault that they got it. And we didn't really, there's a lot of shame about it. And then, in the 80s, it was like HIV is like, well, maybe you did some things you shouldn't have, and therefore you have HIV. And like now we both know that like with education and prevention and certain medications, like none of those are a death sentence if you catch them early. But when it comes to addiction, man, we no, the 50s were a long time ago. That's before you and I. And yet, like in that time, we really haven't moved forward in talking about what the science of addiction is. And for me, I have an arts degree from a state school. Like I don't really understand science, but I suddenly that allowed me to not think that like I was just a screw up or that it was a moral failing or that there was something rotten and wrong with me. It was like, oh, now I understand brain chemistry and I understand that I have a brain disorder.
Well,
And
even what I mean, this is across some other things too. Like think about people who are like schizophrenic.
sure.
It's when people act in a way like when you have cancer, you're not like showing up to a meeting like, oh my God, he's like so like acting like he has cancer.
Yeah, I know.
But when you're drunk, you're acting in a way that's not socially like acceptable, even though alcohol and even alcohol abuse is totally acceptable. But as soon as you have some consequences from it, do you know what I mean? All of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that person's acting crazy. It is a weird thing with society that hasn't changed that much. We understand it more and we are more I don't even want to use the word forgiving, but we're more like, oh, that person has a problem or that person has addiction. But it's interesting if you think about it.
Well, and I have great friends that have gotten cancer and they, like the community rallies around
Right.
them and people cook and people bake for them and we donate money and I don't run races, but some people run races. And like it's so shame free. In fact, I had this amazing experience. I went to the doctor like about 2 years ago, and the doctor said, just so you know, you're pre-diabetic, which means that a combination of genetics and choices you've made have put you in this place. And I think if you don't make some changes to your lifestyle, you won't be happy with what the result is. And it was so amazing because I was like, this is this super shame-free conversation. And so like I lost some weight and like I drank more water and I slept more. And then when I went back, they were like, you're not pre-diabetic anymore. And it was like, oh my God, how amazing. I didn't have to like, in diabetes, we don't wait till you've lost a leg before we treat you. We don't wait until it is dire. And you're like, oh, these are all the conversations that we're missing to be able to say someone early on, like, hey, a combination of genetics and choices you've made have led you to this moment. And let's think through what the options are because I don't think you're going to like where this is going. I mean, that would have been a different conversation. The only conversations I got were like, everybody drinks, pull it together, or
That's what
like,
I'm saying, that
yeah,
it's not, it's like antisocial behavior almost, even though it's total social behavior. But
yeah,
I remember getting a report from my physical that my liver enzymes were high. And you should have seen me going like, "Oh my God, but I hardly drink. That's crazy." You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, how could that happen? I guess is that just my body? You know what I mean?
yeah. Of
And
course. Is that me punching my liver,
yes, that's
30
great. That's
times a
so
day?
weird. I don't understand that at all. It never would have been like, wow, I really, because probably because I drink a lot every single night. But how can I cut down on
Yeah,
my.
you're right. I'll eat less cheese. If is that what it is? Sure.
Yeah, magically after I got sober, my liver became completely normal.
Yeah, odd how that works.
In my mind, though, even before I got sober, I was like, I do not drink that much. If you really counted up the drinks, I mean, I drank every single night, and my realizing I had a problem came when I just couldn't stop drinking. When it was
Yeah,
like any day, didn't matter if I had the flu, if I wasn't feeling good that day. It was like by that night, I was going to be having my drinks and my Xanax, which
yeah.
made me pass out by the end of the night. But I still was like, but I don't drink that much, only a couple of drinks, but every single night and I can't stop, which should have been a sign to me. It wasn't the sign though. But so, okay, so you start realizing that there's science behind it.
Yeah, and that I would honestly like whenever I was having a like that feeling of like I can't hear, like the world is spinning, like I'm starting to freak out, like I know that like a drink would calm me down. I just had to like picture what was happening in my brain, that like brain chemistry was taking over, and that like and then I would go eat ice cream. I ate a lot of ice cream early on because it was just like, oh, you get that like sugar rush, you get that understanding, and then like it's gone in about 15 minutes, and so like I just for some reason, because I had been raised Mormon, the whole God thing is like I just can't do it. And so for me, not only does that not help me, but it really turns me off to what the conversation is. And so to be able to think about science, and I don't think they're exclusive. I think whatever works for you, you should do. And I know plenty of religious people who also believe in science. But for me, to think about science suddenly was like, what, it wasn't about shame. It wasn't about mistakes I had made. It was like, oh, this is what's happening in my body. I had a friend, this isn't funny, but it's funny, who got cancer a second time. And then we were joking that not everybody was like, what? We cured it the first. What are you talking about? You have it again? Oh my God. Like there's no punishment for having it again. It's just like, no, that's what happened in your body. But when it comes to addiction, if you relapse, we're like, well, the first time didn't work. It didn't take.
That's
It's just
so
like it's so
true. That's so true. Nobody goes, when you get cancer again, no one goes, well, I guess you didn't change your lifestyle enough.
they were
Guess
like
you didn't work hard enough at not having cancer.
they're like, does the state have to pay for your cancer treatments again? What? Okay, we'll do it this time. But if it's a third time, then it's just you and your bone marrow from there on out. No, it's like
Yeah.
nobody thinks that way.
I have a
Uh,
friend who got cancer, who had cancer and alcoholism at the same time, and wrote about the difference between how people behave towards her getting diagnosed with cancer and her going to rehab. And nobody was like doing a meal train for her going
yeah,
to rehab.
yeah, yeah. So I got out. I started to get like some sobriety underneath me, able to repair some of those relationships, some of them not. And then I wrote this play that because I really wanted to encapsulate my experience, but also couldn't find anything. I didn't know about you then. I couldn't find anything that was funny. And I was like, how is this entire field Like there's nothing funny about it whatsoever. I don't understand anything that's not funny. You know, you go to an awful funeral and everybody is just waiting for somebody to say something dumb so that everybody can laugh, whether it's funny or not, because that's how we process things. And so I wanted to, and I grew up in the 80s, so I really understood this like after school special take on like a very special episode of like, when an alcoholic shows up and, the light music plays and we understand that, Uncle Brian is going to be different at Thanksgiving this year or whatever it is. And so I really wanted to write a funny play. And even when I was writing it and pitching it, I would be like, it's a funny play about addiction. And people would be like, that's not a thing. Like that isn't a genre. And I was really lucky. I found this commercial producer. His name is Tom Curtihy. He's been in recovery. And he was married to the great playwright Terrence McNally, and both of them were sober. And so I just found the right person to champion the play. And so we did it at a couple theaters. We took it to New York. Um, and then we brought it back in um, 2023. And all these people, I'm very lucky, like Annalee Ashford, who's a Tony winner, and John Larroquette, and Hank Azaria from The Simpsons, and Jason Biggs, and all these people signed on to help to produce it, to make it happen. And so, like, all these amazing sober people stepped forward to be like a comedy about addiction. It is what's needed to be able to have the conversation. And so when the play happened, two things happened. After every performance, somebody would come up and say to the cast, "Okay, I'm ready to get help." Which these poor actors are just standing out front because they want you to tell them how good a job they did. Like they
Yeah.
really are not trained professionals. They just want some praise at the end of the night. So our producers had to really put together like resources for them. And then I started getting contacted like daily of people being like, how can we, what can you talk to this person? Can you reach out to this? Can I share your play with this? Do you mind having a Zoom call with my daughter? And it was like, oh my God, none of us are we're prepared for the onslaught. Just the need was so huge. And so that's why I started this organization called the Recovery Arts Project, which works to use the arts to try to change national narratives around addiction. And it's really taken off in 3 years. We're working with the Clinton Foundation now to put naloxone into every Broadway theater front and back. We just announced this morning that we're partnering with the Terrence McNally Foundation, the Guggenheim Museum in New York to try to present recovery plays there for people. And then I'm working with Hank Azaria on his one-man show, which is about his recovery to be able to put out into the world. So we're trying to generate as much kind of content that changes narratives around what addiction is. Because to your point, like it kind of feels like it's all I talk about all the time, but you realize how little bandwidth that really is out in the world, that people really still, when they come across it, find it, if they need it, they glom onto it because they don't know where else to get that information.
It's still not 100% normalized, I feel like we've normalized some other things, maybe certain things like bipolar disorder, like it's much more socially acceptable to say, "Hey, I've been diagnosed with something," than to say like, because you don't get diagnosed with alcoholism. You just go, "Well, I fucked up so bad that I've had come to the conclusion that I must be an alcoholic." You know what I mean? It's some kind of, we still think of it as some kind of moral failing, even if we've gone further in normalizing it and going, it's okay to say that you have a problem, but more work needs to be done. I'm glad you're doing this.
Well, I like to say that we have solved the scourge of peanuts in our lifetime. Like it used to be that if you had a peanut allergy, which is a very real thing, you're just kind of screwed. You just had to look out for it. But now, if you say like, "Hey, Delta, I have a peanut allergy," they'll pull every peanut off that plane. Like I go to peanut-free conferences, right? And the only difference is everybody knows having a peanut allergy is not a moral failing, right? But like in our
I don't know.
Lifetime.
Do you have a peanut allergy?
I do not have a peanut. I really love peanuts.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, I didn't know I was doing a podcast with somebody with a peanut allergy.
No, I know that that's a whole other thing. But I'm just saying, like that, people are like, I have a peanut allergy, and an entire conference will be like, well, we'll pull peanuts from 30,000 people attending.
Right,
And it's
right.
like shame free, and we can do it. And when it comes to addiction, it's still, oh boy. And, even I get tired of having to tell people, like every dinner you have to like explain why the wine is getting passed around and you're, not going to take a part of it. Um, so I do think like we have so far to go in terms of just changing, and this is what I think the arts can really be a part of. There's a great uh, I don't know if you know this, the only field to achieve gender parity in our country is forensic science. It is the only field where it's equal men and women. And the reason that they credit that is that 25 years ago, CSI just cast women as forensic scientists on the TV show. So a whole generation of women grew up being like, oh, that's a job for women. And I have a sister-in-law who's a CSI, and she's like, yeah, I've never been in a room that wasn't half women. So it's like the arts has this amazing power to change what our perception is when we go for it, when we put it out there. There was also a study that was done that tracked gay marriage, and if you can remember, uh, Barack Obama, when he ran for president, was against gay marriage, which feels like crazy now that that was the platform of the Democratic Party, right?
I know,
In
I'm so
our lifetime.
embarrassed.
And so, but like, so they did this study on like, well, why do we believe different things in our lifetime than we used to believe? And the answer was the arts. The answer was the TV that you watch, the books that you read, the podcasts that you listen to, the celebrities that come out. And also what's amazing in it is that it's not one thing. There was not like one movie that came out and we all thought something different. It had to be like Ellen came out and Magic Johnson got HIV and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and Modern Family. And suddenly we're at a place where my mother feels like she has more gay friends than she had 20 years ago, which is 100% not true. It's just that we have collectively as a country believed different things than we believed 20, 30 years ago. And it's not a straight line, but the arts are what made that possible for people to change how they think about things. Change it so much that when I say Barack Obama was against gay marriage, when I'm out speaking, people are like, "Is that true? Is that can't be? No, he's one of us. That can't be." And it was like, no, that was the stance of the Democratic Party in our lifetime. And so that's why I feel like I want to have that conversation 30 years from now. You may still be doing this podcast. It'll be huge. And we'll come on and we'll talk about how it seems insane that 20 or 30 years ago, like addiction was this, we all know it's a disease, but also could you just kind of pull it together and get over it because I have a big event coming up or Christmas is shortly. And like we don't really treat it as what it is.
I think, a big part of why I wrote the book Drunkish, that this podcast is based on, is the same as you. I think we really have that in common. I was like, I'm a comedy writer,
Yeah.
and I haven't read any really funny books. I haven't, the Quitlet that I've read is very dead serious,
Oh,
and I want it to just be funny, like I was about like having a baby. I was like,
yeah.
it's all kind of serious. And I want to call out my own experiences with it that might not be like other people's experience. That was having a baby. I want to do that, but with a book about like realizing that I'm an alcoholic. And I
And
want to make other women see themselves and go, oh, it's not so dead serious. I can still have fun. I don't have to give up my personality if I
yeah.
decide to choose sobriety.
Well, and what's so funny is that you go to, if you get like a great AA meeting, people will tell stories and they're great storytellers, and the room just howls with laughter. People tell these, it's dark humor, but that's my favorite. People tell the story of like they tried to steal a helicopter from a cop. And and the room is just like roaring. And then you go out into the world, and all you see on TV is like four people in a circle drinking coffee, like chanting the name of the person who's talking. And so, of course, the average person is like, I don't want that. That looks terrible. But it's like,
Yeah.
that's not the joy and warmth that you see. And so part of me was like, I think I can be funny doing this, but also like I just want to share what the actual experiences and not what TV has told us recovery looks like.
Yeah. So you and the play has done really, really well.
Yeah, it just I played in New York, and then it just closed in London. It went over there and ran for a while, which is funny because British people laugh less, but they seem to enjoy it more. So we'll take that.
Hmm.
And then you'll find this funny. We toured it around, and we did a reading in Scotland. So I was like, oh, it's so great to come back to like my ancestors' people. And they had a bar that was open at the reading, and people brought beer in to drink beer while watching the play. I think maybe because in Scotland beer isn't drinking, but nobody seemed to be bothered by it but me. You know what I mean? So it was like, I guess great that you can experience this. But the same thing happened was it's a very American play. Obviously the references are American. So many jokes just don't no one knows what I'm talking about, right? And yet still at the end of it somebody stood up and said like, I brought my family here because I didn't feel like they understood who I really was. And some mother was there because she had lost her son and she didn't really understand what had happened. And so she wanted to better understand. And you realize like, oh my God, they're regardless of like pop culture references, it is the most universal story that we are all across struggling with and trying to figure out. And over there, less resources, mental health resources. There's a Train Spotting is a horrific movie, and you realize like, well, that generation is now parents, and that's what's going on. So it's for them, feels equally as dangerous and needed.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you're doing this. Are you going to reopen? Are you going to do another run or what's next for you?
We're in the midst of trying to make it into an animated short that could go out, and then we're in talks with a bunch of theaters about where it goes next. So we're hoping to know where it lands in the near future.
Well, I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. Really, really fun. Everybody, Sean Daniels, where can we find you? Plug your Insta or IG as they call it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it's just Sean D. Daniels that's on there. And then also the name of my organization is the Recovery Arts Project. So if you give it a Google, you can find us there.
Okay, and I'll put it in the episode description. Thank you again so much, and I'll see everybody next week. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.